to India and Ireland, round Africa and back again. We don't really need to know just where we'll go. Maybe Canada, then to Brazil, then through the Alpine foothills. All I really want to know is, can we go? Oh baby, can we go? Round and around the globe.
Welcome to Take Me With You, episode 75. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Cheryl. We are two well-traveled people who want to go everywhere.
But that's not going to happen. So instead, we'll travel vicariously by inviting a guest to share their unique travel stories with us.
Today, we're talking to Gabe. Gabe is a life coach who lives in Virginia. Welcome, Gabe.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yay! So we just met Gabe. Gabe is friends with one of our former guests, Michaela. So this is a friends of friends little, I don't know, podcasting blind date. I don't know what we call this, but
I like it.
And you and Michaela met where?
We met in southern Spain, a city called Malaga.
Very cool. That's great. Yay. So this
And why
is
were
all-
you there?
So I went there to join the nonprofit that she was working for, kind of an apprenticeship opportunity down there for about a year. So Michaela and I spent a year together in southern Spain.
Nice. Malaga's awesome. What did you like about Malaga?
I love Malaga because there's a large population of young people, kind of in the mix of there being a lot of older generations. You've got a large generation of younger people. So it's very lively. It's very carefree. Their slogan is like, tranquilo, tranquilo, or like, slow down, like, take it easy. So it's a restful culture, which can sometimes be a little bit frustrating if you're trying to get somewhere or do something or trying to ask for your check the 20th time.
Oh, boy.
But I love Malaga for so many different reasons. It's also very international. I mean, you've got the boat that goes back and forth to Africa every day from our ports. There's a lot of people that come there to study English at different language schools. So you get to meet a lot of people from kind of around the globe that are coming there because there is really great weather in the spring and summertime. But you get that laid back Spanish experience with Mediterranean food. And it's just, altogether a beautiful place to be. The mountains and the beach right there together.
Oh, I love that. Oh, kind of jealous.
Kind of jealous?
Very jealous.
There you go. That's the honest answer, Cheryl. So, Gabe, we have a set of 3 questions that we like to ask all of our guests. And the first one is, why do you travel?
That's a really good question. I probably should have studied up on these questions before we met. I'm on the
There's
spot
really a wrong
now.
answer, so don't stress. This isn't a test.
Yeah. Well, I think traveling for me began as, it just kind of began organically for me. I wanted to serve with some different nonprofits that were outside the United States. So I worked in anti-human trafficking efforts in Costa Rica. I did some missions work in northern Mexico that was on the border of Texas, which I grew up in Texas, so it was accessible. And then I've also done some documentary work as a former filmmaker. It's kind of something that I do as passion projects now. But I did some documentary work for a orphanage in Guatemala. So getting the opportunity to work abroad kind of opened my eyes to the fact that I really didn't know much about the world around me. And I find something so beautiful about being in a place that I've never been before with people speaking other languages and like getting to experience culture and something that is so foreign to me. There's a beauty in being caught up in a culture that is foreign to you. And I know not everybody has such ease going into going into cultures that are different from them. But I don't know, as an extrovert who loves people and loves story, it gives me a greater understanding of my own roots and gives me a greater understanding of the world around me, and actually gives me a lot of grace and humility as well. So I love travel because I love people. And the more I travel, the more I know of the world, the better I am as a contributor to this world, and as a friend and a family member. And yeah, just I'm better for it.
Wow. That's an amazing answer.
Oh, thanks. It's my heart.
Yeah, very clearly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Before we move on to the next question, I'm curious because you're talking about opportunities to get to know people in other places better and cultures and learn more. And you've had 2 opportunities to live abroad. But for our listeners and those of us who aren't necessarily going to be living abroad, but still want to get to experience all those things, do you have any advice for someone when they're just taking like a 1 to 2 week trip somewhere? How do they get to the point on that short trip where they could experience the people and the culture and those differences and kind of get beyond the touristy to like some of those real experiences?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such a great question. Because when you ask me that question, I automatically think of that day when I was in Brussels, Belgium on a long weekend because it was the cheapest ticket out of Malaga. And because of visa purposes, I needed to leave the country for a minute. But I was sitting in a cafe, journaling and drinking black coffee at a table that was like a community table where, you know, you kind of just share the space with people speaking German and speaking French and speaking English. And it was like beautifully fall outside. And I'm like, man, this is when I felt the most alive. Like I was just taking everything in and I was very present. So I think if anything, if I could encourage anyone, whether they have a weekend trip, a 1 week trip, a 2 week trip abroad, or even within our own country, like, you know, get out and go to Texas if you live in Washington. Get out and visit Chicago if you've never been there and you live in New Mexico. But taking the opportunity to be present and really look around you. Like, don't stick to your phone the whole time. Don't have your whole trip planned out for yourself. Like, let there be room for like surprise appointments, or what I would call like divine appointments of like, yeah, this was supposed to happen. Like I was supposed to be here at this time. And think about the things in your own life that like make you come alive. Like, what are those things for me? I know being out in nature is something that makes me come alive. Drinking a freshly brewed black coffee, being or going through a museum makes me feel alive. Like, do some of those things in a new place and then like experiencing them in a new way. It's just like so rich.
That's a cool idea of taking the things that you enjoy doing at home or in places that you're comfortable and find a way to experience those things, but in a new culture. That's a really, really interesting idea. I really like that.
That's a good challenge. I want to figure out like how could I work that into all of my future trips. Take those couple of things. So for me, rock climbing was like a thing that I love to do. I'm a rock climber. And when I moved to Spain, one of the first things I did was find a rock climbing gym. One of the first things I did was start to have conversations with those people there and get information about like outdoor trips. Same thing when I lived in China. I found an outdoor rock climbing group, and although I was nervous to be hopping in a van with strangers from China, like there were actually a lot of expats that were also living in the area. But just taking a leap and doing something that you would typically do at home and do it somewhere else, because you're always going to benefit from doing something new, but then you're also going to enjoy it because it's something you already like to do. So be yourself.
Be yourself wherever you go. Yeah.
That was such a good. Wow. Okay. So question number 2. Sorry, I'm overwhelmed, and we're not even like through questions. That was just one question.
I didn't even prep.
I mean, you're doing fine. No prep required.
Great.
So what type of traveler are you, Gabe?
Can you expand upon that question a little bit?
I can, except it's intentionally vague to let you define how you would describe yourself as a traveler.
Okay, so this is an open question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, this is not a multiple choice question. True or false?
Yes. See, my life coach in me asks the question back to get more clarification.
Yep.
That's my tendency, but I appreciate the vagueness. It makes me search my brain a little more. What type of traveler am I? I would say that when I travel, I enjoy doing road trips with my friends. Like I've done in the past. I definitely enjoy traveling with others, but I think some of the most special experiences I've had in traveling have been alone. And as a single, almost 30-something female, a lot of people can look at that and be like, oh, well, isn't that dangerous? Or, oh, like you shouldn't be doing that. And like, I understand that, but then I've also had experiences that probably have helped me and have led me to a place where I feel confident and secure in the decisions I make. And I always use wisdom when I'm traveling alone. I like to plan, but not plan too much. So I don't want to over plan and have every hour and every minute planned to a T. But like I said earlier, like leaning into that opportunity for surprises, wherever you go. And really just taking things as they come. Some of the places that I visited and vacationed, there have been special events going on that I had no clue were going to be happening. And just kind of like, it's like one of those, what do you call it? It's like an Easter egg or like a happy accident is what we call those, right? A happy accident to happen upon those things. So I like to go into a trip. If I'm going by myself, I don't feel the need to have to plan everything to a T. But I'll make sure I have like security in where I'm staying overnight and, some of the highlights of the things that I want to do. But I also want to take the opportunity to do things in a location that like the locals do. So is there a place that's not a chain that people like to dine at? Is there an experience that maybe isn't necessarily like the biggest touristy, most touristy thing to do? Like I want to go and see or do that. I like to make friends when I'm traveling. Making friends comes pretty easily to me. I'm a pretty open person, so I like to sit at the table that is like the community table where anybody can sit down and join you. And I don't know why, but I think I just sort of attract other people that are kind of looking for, people to talk to and like to share in the journey. I can remember sitting in Kyoto, Japan, and I was just doing some writing, kind of planning out my next day a little bit. And I had a girl sit down next to me. She's like, "Hey, can I sit here? Like, saw you were sitting here." And basically we spent the whole next day together. We had like one conversation about an hour and I said, "Hey, I'm going here tomorrow." And she says, "Great." Like, I was wanting to go see that too. I was like, "Hey, do you want to go together?" And so anyway, I'm still in contact with her. She lives in LA, but I have like friends all over because I just kind of go into things with an open mind. And also when you're experiencing other cultures, it's like a good idea to like have a bit of grace and humility. Like you're outside of your territory a lot of times when you're traveling in Europe or Asia or wherever you are. Sometimes even in the States, you might feel a little bit like you're out of your territory. I mean, we're huge. The USA is huge and there's so many different demographics in different places. So as a traveler, I think I like to keep an open mind and open heart to be as humble as I can and as respectful as I can of other people. when I travel. And I think you gain the most out of that too, because people might do something differently than you do. And, you know, the people might not eat dinner until like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, like they did in Spain. And you might be starving, but it's just a part of the adventure. It's a part of the experience. And you get to kind of look back and be like, oh yeah, that time I was starving and thought I was going to die. But man, you know, that Mediterranean food I had at 9 p.m. was incredible. So, yeah, as a traveler, I'm not planning out my next vacation or my next place I'm going to. I think it just kind of happens organically for me that like I happen upon the next place I'm going to go. Perhaps it's a friend that I have in another country. I have a friend in Poland that I met in southern Spain when I was living there. And she's always been like, hey, come visit me, come visit me. And I want to. It'll look like when's the best timing for that. And I'm not going to push for it to happen outside of its timing because that's no fun. But yeah.
All right. So one final question before we get to launch into your travel story. And I feel a little silly asking the question because I think that you've already answered it like 3 or 4 times.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Great things. No.
Don't
It's a good thing.
apologize.
It's a good thing. But it's really good. What is and so maybe this is the unique part, but what is your number one travel tip? Because you've given us lots of tips already, which has been awesome. But if you were to just have one that this is your top tip, what would that be?
If I could give a travel tip, I think this one kind of speaks across the board. But I would say go with the flow. Because even as much as you can plan, as much as you can prepare, as much as you can do the research on where you're going or have packed everything that you needed to pack, you know, made all the reservations, like go with the flow because it'll produce better memories. It'll, you know, be less stressful that way. I'm like looking at my wall right now, which there's a map of Spain that my older sister gave me for Christmas. And it says, wherever you go, go with all your heart. So that's another like thing that I would encourage people to do is like, go with the flow and go with your heart.
Love it. That's awesome.
Awesome. All right. What trip of the many that you have been on are you going to tell us about today?
Yeah, I'd love to tell you guys about my walk of 520 miles across northern Spain.
Woo!
Oh my goodness.
Is this the Camino de Santiago?
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so I think before you tell us about the actual experience, can you just give us a brief little overview? What is the Camino de Santiago and why is it a big deal?
Yeah. For sure. It is a spiritual Catholic pilgrimage that dates back to the Middle Ages. So it's called the Walk of St. James. It originated in the north of Spain. The most popular route is called the Camino Frances. This is a route that starts in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in the south of France. And then as you walk, because this is a pilgrimage, you're like walking day in and day out. You walk across northern Spain, and the city that everybody arrives in, no matter what route you take, you will end up in Santiago de Compostela, which is in the northwest of Spain. So
there's multiple routes that you can take. It's not just one path?
Yeah. So this is the most popular route is the Camino Frances that I just mentioned. It's the route that I walked myself. But after that route, people started walking from all sorts of different places. So you can walk from Portugal and start near Lisbon, or there's some other starting places that you can start walking from. So if you think like of the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail, you have many different trails leading into like the main trail. Same goes for the Camino de Santiago. I met a lady who had retired, who was living in Holland, stepped out her front door and started walking. And she'd been walking for months.
Oh,
can you imagine leaving all of your stuff, putting a 45-liter backpack on your back, and then just walking? I mean, there's routes from Italy, there's routes from other places in Europe, there's routes from Germany. But the most popular one that people come to walk is either to walk the entire 500 odd miles. It's like 800 and something kilometers. of the Camino Frances, or in order to get a certificate that says, yes, I walked the Camino de Santiago, you have to walk at least 100 kilometers of it. It's a World Heritage Site. It's one of the 2 pilgrimages in the world that are deemed by UNESCO as World Heritage Sites.
Interesting that something that long could be considered a site.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's a World Heritage pilgrimage, but it's recognized by UNESCO. And the other one that is recognized by UNESCO is in Japan. And I just so happened, like I said, I don't plan in advance for some of these things, but I just to go to Japan to visit a couple of friends from college and was doing some research on outdoor hiking opportunities and stumbled upon the Kumano in southern mainland. And there was this connection to UNESCO because it's the second one in the world, the World Heritage recognized pilgrimage. So I did that one.
Oh, that's really cool. That's a fun fact. Neat. So I've been to Spain 4 times, and I love Spain, and I've gotten to visit different areas at different points and everything. And the last time I was there a couple of years ago, I kind of did a big loop, and at one point was staying with a couple in Estella in kind of northern Spain. It's not over the mountains, but still northern. And this woman I was staying with was walking me around the town and just talking about things. And then all of a sudden I heard Americans mirrored like 2. And so she's really friendly and was speaking with them and everything in English. And then she was like, oh, well, this woman staying with me, she's American. So then we were chatting and they were like, oh, are you doing the Camino? And I was thinking like, why are they asking me? That feels like a very random question for them to be asking me. And then come to find out that it's one of the stops on the Camino de Santiago. And I was like, oh, no wonder. And so that was kind of cool because I would love to do it at some point. Like it's something that is kind of on my bucket list is to walk it. And so that was fun being like, oh, that's cool. And so, but correct me if I'm wrong. It's different than the PCT in that on the Camino de Santiago, you could stay in hostels or hotels or something along the way as opposed to tent camping along the way.
People choose to tent camp.
Okay.
I mean, unless you're an avid hiker, I don't recommend it to people who are just like, day in, day out hikers, like day hikers. But if you're used to being on the Appalachian Trail, PCT, like you can do that. But there's a special experience that you get when you stay overnight with other people who are walking the Camino. So people who walk the Camino are called peregrinos or pilgrims. Because you're walking pilgrimage. People walk for all sorts of different reasons. You can walk for spiritual reasons. You can walk because you love being in the outdoors. You can walk to meet new people. I met some people who were like, yeah, I lost both my parents this year and I'm walking to process my grief. Or and I'm trying to figure out what's next. Or I just quit my job and I hated it and I'm moving on and I'm what my next steps are. So people walk for all sorts of different reasons. And what they say is like, your Camino is your Camino. Like walk a weekend, walk a couple days, walk a chunk, and then come back every vacation that you have and walk another chunk. The process of it, you start walking from wherever you decide is your beginning. And each night you stay at a place called an albergue, which is basically a hostel for pilgrims only. You have to show
interesting.
And then you have to show them your credential. And your credential is something that you pick up that says, hi, I'm walking the Camino. This is where I started. These are the stamps that I've gotten at bars and cafes and places that I've stayed, cathedrals that I visited along the way to show that I'm walking. That's how they keep track and make sure that like when you get to the end and you say, oh, I walked 400 miles, they're able to say, okay, well, let me check and make sure that you've gotten all the stamps along the way. Because you could have hopped in a taxi or a bus or something and just said that you walked it.
Yeah.
But that's why the stamps are important. But staying overnight in these albergues is so incredibly special because you're walking alongside and passing through on your way with so many different people from around the world who are walking for all sorts of different reasons, who all have different stories. And, some people are more open to talking than other people, but it's really cool to just go out and have dinner with some people, or go out on your own if you need some like single alone downtime. But yeah, the albergue experience is really cool. I mean, I always slept in my own sleeping sack, or, kept my like bath towel over me when it was really hot. But it was always safe. And some of these places have menus for like a meal that they'll serve for pilgrims if you want it. You just pay a little bit extra. But it was like anywhere from €9 to €15 at the most per night.
That's not bad at all.
Wow. That's doable. That's really cool.
I'll let you guys do the U.S. currency math for that. It's a little different than when I was living there. The U.S. dollar actually went farther out there, and now it does not go as far. So really, really relatively inexpensive.
Here's what I want now. I want to start a spin-off podcast where I just go work at one of those places maybe and just interview people, because I feel like the stories would be fascinating.
Work with that. I mean, that's coming job is I will be working in Santiago de Compostela. I will be at a Pilgrim Welcome Center and be working as a debrief coach. 350,000 people that walked the Camino from all over the world last year. You get to meet like a good chunk of those people walking through those Welcome Center doors.
Wow.
I mean, hey, come out there.
Wow. So that's where you're going next. And like, how did this, you walking this trip, like how did that play into you making this choice to go there next? Like what's been your timeline and your decision-making process with all of that?
Yeah, so I had first heard about the Camino de Santiago when I went to a conference in Chicago, Illinois, actually. The conference is called Storyline Conference. And I was watching one of my favorite authors speak, Donald Miller, and he had a bunch of guest speakers as well. And there was a best friend and his friend who talked about the Camino and talked about doing it. One of them was in a wheelchair, and he's had issues with his health, and it's caused him to not be able to use the lower half of his body. So his best friend said, hey, if you want to go and walk the Camino, like I'll push you. I was so inspired by their story that I told myself, I was like, man, I want to do that someday. Well, just a little bit later, I started pursuing Spain for learning Spanish, and then also working with this nonprofit down in southern Spain. And that experience with that nonprofit, it just so happened that the day after I arrived in Spain, we hopped in the car and we went up north to serve at one of these albergues. We spent the entire first week of my time in Spain washing sheets and preparing meals and stamping credentials and giving hugs and providing clean water and just like championing on these pilgrims that were walking to Santiago. I just knew in that first week, this is what I have to do. I have to do this at the end of my time in Spain. So I made plans in my heart to do it. And then when it push came to shove and we were there and it was time to make the decision, I was like, all right, I don't know how all this is going to come together, but I think it'd be a great opportunity to transition and say goodbye to Spain for now. And then to kind of, think on and pray on, like, what am I doing next? Like, what are my next steps? And then I love people and I love being outdoors. So it was just like everything in one that was amazing. And I was really looking forward to that experience. So that experience on the Camino that first week that I was in Spain led me to walk one of my last weeks in Spain. And then from there, I saw what they were doing at the Pilgrim House. I saw what they were doing at this Pilgrim Welcome Center. I was like, wow, this is incredible. And I had already felt like I needed to come back and get my life coaching certification and credentials. So I came back in pursuit of that, had this weird year in between in China, and then came back to the States and was like, all right, I think I think it's time to pursue Spain again. So I did, and it just so happened that they had openings, and they had some roles that I would be able to fill, and I'd be able to use my coaching. And so everything just kind of fell into place. It was kind of beautiful how it all worked out. But I think my love for people, my skills and my talents, and knowing the heart of a traveler, knowing the heart of a pilgrim, and having experienced a little bit of what these people are going through is what's leading me back to Santiago. It's what's leading me back to do the work that I'm going to be able to do. I'll be able to walk the Camino here and there, maybe in bits and pieces while I'm there, and get to visit friends in other European countries along the way. But I'm really excited to be able to invest in the lives and invest in the transition, in the processing of these people who are pilgrims. I mean, when you travel, you're a pilgrim. You're stepping into new territory. It's a beautiful but can be a scary thing. And, we tend to process a lot of what's happening back at home or what's happening in our hearts and our minds when we get out of our comfort zone, when we go somewhere else. So, man, I encourage everybody, if anything, to travel, but also to go walk the Camino. Go alone is what I recommend, the most. But if you go with a significant other, or go with a friend, or go with a group, it's still like one of the most transformative experiences of my life, and can be for other people's lives.
That's awesome. I love that.
So how long did you spend on the trail, and what were some of the highlights of either things you saw or did or experienced or thought while you were walking the trail?
Yeah, for sure. So I walked for 35 days.
Okay.
You don't have to pack your lunch or your meals or anything, because you're typically stopping at like a cafe or, grabbing something from a market, a mercado, along your way. But I had some breakfast bars, like Luna bars and RX bars, that I was able to keep in my pack for me.
That's smart. I hike with those too.
Those are so good. They were like my get up and go snack until I got to my cafe for the morning. And I know I'm speaking in kilometers, but it just made sense back then. Going out there.
Good.
Just drink a cafe, walk some more, stop for lunch, walk some more, arrive in the place where I'm staying overnight, take a shower, wash my clothes, go to dinner, something of that, and repeat. So that was kind of like my typical rhythms day by day. I walked like a half marathon a day. And then the last 2 days, I walked a full marathon length with some friends that I had made. And then the next day just walked like 5 kilometers to the end of our journey together.
Nice.
But there's a really amazing cathedral in Burgos that I visited, and it took me 4 hours to walk through because they have a museum and the architecture is just beautiful. That was definitely one of my favorite attractions that I saw along the way. Other things that you'll see that a lot of people know about that are special to the Camino is the Iron Cross. And a lot of people will take a memento or like an item or carry a rock with them along their journey. And when they get to this part where the desert part of the Camino is ending and the green, lush mountain part of the end of the Camino is beginning, they leave their memento, their letter, their rock that they've been carrying, whatever it is, at this Iron Cross. As on this hill, and then they continue on their journey. So that's a really experience and something to see along the way. I also saw the biggest herd of sheep that I have seen zoo in America. One of those like drive-throughs. You don't really see like a stampede of sheep coming your way just any. So my friend from Denmark and we decided to get up and walk at 4:00 in the morning, take a night walk, which was actually quite terrifying since there were dogs next door that were barking. We had no idea if they were going to come after us or not, and we couldn't see them. But as we were coming upon sunrise and coming up over a hill, we see one sheep, 2 sheep, and then just like this huge herd. We couldn't even get through on the path that we were trying to go because there was in another farm vehicle that was just like moving the sheep up the hill. And it was one of the most magical experiences that I had on the Camino, I think, was just this like, wow, this is so funny. Like, we are stopped in our tracks because we have to allow this herd of sheep
that's so funny.
To get around us so that we can continue on our way. But we're just kind of open to those experiences.
Oh, that's so fun. Okay, so I'm looking at Google Maps right now, trying to figure out if I'm just looking at like major, like paths, road, whatever, between cities. Is that kind of where it goes? So you mentioned Burgos. I'm seeing, so like, where in Spain of the major cities? Does it go through Leon, Ponferrada?
Leon.
Okay. And then Lugo? Is that here? Lugo?
That's where I served at my first week.
Okay. And then to Santiago de Compostela. So, and is it, and then on the western side of Spain, is it Pamplona?
Yes, that's actually where I began my journey.
Okay. Cool. Great. And then I can kind of see where it looks like between Leon and Ponferrada is where it gets from desert to the lush green.
Yeah, something really special about the Camino is that they call the Camino Frances the 3-part journey because it, in the beginning, is the journey of the body. Your body's getting used to walking. You think like, oh, I'll be fine. Oh no, your feet are aching. Your back is sore. You might be getting blisters. Thankfully, I never got a blister at all.
Oh, what shoes did you wear?
Yeah, North Face.
All right.
So North Face trekking shoes that I wore were great. But they call it the journey of the body, the mind, and the spirit. So the first part, your body's getting adjusted to walking, and you're walking through the mountains and, elevation and hills. And then you get to like the desert part. And that's where you have a few days of like long walks where you don't see a bar, you don't see a small pueblo, you don't come across many people maybe, but it's just like farmland and open and desert and kind of looks dead sometimes depending on the season of the year that you walk through. But they call that the meseta. And then the third part of the journey is when you're stepping back into Galicia, which is like the lush green mountains, and it's rainy and it's beautiful. And that's like the spirit part of the journey. And I can attest to the fact that it very much was like that for me. Many people experience it that way when they've done the entire thing.
Wow. That's so cool. That is different that you can stop at so many little places along the way, even in one day. I think that's different than I was picturing, and not quite as remote as I was picturing. So that sounds even more fun.
Areas. And you always want to exercise safety and caution, especially walking alone. But generally, you're going to pass through 3, maybe 4 pueblos or maybe a big city during a day.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting to see how they live. A lot of these businesses are relying on pilgrims to walk through and sit down at their bar and eat some food or drink their coffee. And then you've got some other like touristy attractions in those major cities. Like I went to a chocolate making factory, which was pretty.
Where was that at?
I think it was Astorga. So cool. Just to read the history of it, but also to get to try the delicacies of that area.
So how you said that you don't like to be super planned, not that you just wing it all the time, but how much planning needed to happen to make this trip successful? Because you said, you passed through several pueblos, if not a big city every day, but then there was also a stretch of it where you didn't. And so like with lodging, you mentioned that was one thing that you wanted to make sure that you had secured. So did you get that figured out ahead of time and kind of plan how far you're going to walk every day? Or did you do it kind of day by day? Was it something else?
Yeah. So I will tell you that I had a little bit of anxiety and stress planning for this because on a large chunk of the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crust Trail, I've only done kind of things. People. So going alone, having been my first, year living abroad, I was like, okay, I can do this. But I had other people as resources and then online resources to be able to use as I planned. So I did do a little bit more planning than we do for like a trip where I'm going to another city or another town or, visiting another country. I basically gave a range and I said, okay, I can probably walk at least 20 to maybe 28 kilometers a day. And I'll start in Pamplona and then let me look how many kilometers to such and such city or such and such town. And then I kind of planned that way. I kind of gave myself a good idea of what I was going to do so that I knew how long it would take me to complete my Camino. But then there were days that I walked less or I walked more when I was actually on the trail. And I just kind of had to be flexible with myself. And then I had a friend from Denmark who said, we're going to walk 32 kilometers tomorrow. And it was like me being on the Camino. I was like, oh, you're funny. You think... She's like, no, it'll be great. Like I have a video of her capturing her like joy. And I'm like, my feet are not happy hearing that we're going to walk that far. But it was awesome. And I was so excited with the people that I was walking with at the time. And some days you stay behind. I had like 2 rest days along my Camino where I just stayed in one place. If you've made friendships with the people that are kind of walking about the same distances that you are and that you're seeing at least maybe once every couple days, those people. And if you don't have information, like a lot of contact information for most people, you're probably never going to talk to them again unless you're in there too. So there were some plus sides to planning a lot and then some downsides. I didn't plan those rest days. It just kind of happened. And I knew that I had the time to do that. But yeah, I just kind of went with the flow some days, but made sure that I did enough planning in advance to feel like, okay, I'm being wise about this. I've got my wits about me. I know exactly what I'm putting into my pack. I'm weighing it to make sure it's not too heavy and it's not going to kill me as I'm walking and I'm going to have to like dump things here and there. But yeah. And then financially, of course I'm financially planned out. Like, please don't go to the Camino and, not have a budget for your trip. City of Spaniards is amazing, but I would not go, unless you've planned out the financial side of it at least.
For sure. Okay, so if someone was going to walk 1 week of it, what stretch would you recommend?
Ooh.
Oh, that is so hard. Why'd you have to ask me that question? No, I'm just kidding.
I have those hard-hitting questions,
Great question. I think I would probably ask the person what they loved, if they love the ocean, if they love the mountains, kind of where they are in life. But if I were to recommend personally, like a stretch of it that I have walked, I would definitely recommend walking the last 100 kilometers of it. And that's what the main recommendation is. You're going to hear from a lot of people is like, hey, walk that last 100 kilometers. But beyond that, go all the way to the ocean. It's incredible. Like I arrived in Santiago and then we had the festival of St. James. So I kind of stuck around for that. They had a lot of stuff going on, like concerts and food stuff. And it was great. But then after that, I continued on and I walked 3 more days to the ocean. And after walking for a month and never seeing a huge body of water, it was incredible to walk up the cliff and to be at kilometer 0 overlooking the ocean. And just, I remember I had my headphones in and I was weeping, and I had a lady come up to me and ask me in Spanish, like, are you okay? I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm like, I just walked 500 miles. Like, I'm a little emotional. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I would recommend at least walking the last 100 kilometers to Santiago, but then going beyond that. And I think it's about a little over 40 kilometers. I might be wrong. Don't quote me on that.
And what location does that go to? Because I'm seeing a couple spots where the ocean kind of goes in.
I walked to Fistera. No, it's actually, so if you go from Santiago and then go west, it's Fistera, Fistera. And some people call it Finisterre, but it's north of Murcia, which is another area where people end their Camino at kilometer 0.
Oh, I found it. It's actually, yeah, I did. So if I'm on Google Maps.
It's like
it's like way over there.
Yeah, that is not where I was picturing.
No, it's farther. It's a little bit farther north of Santiago, it looks like. Not by a lot.
This is the most western point in Spain then. Because that body of land goes further west with Portugal, but as far as Spain is concerned, that's like the most western, it looks like. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It's absolutely beautiful, both in Finisterre or Fistera, whichever way you say it, and in Murcia. So I took a taxi to Murcia so I could see it. But I have some really beautiful photos from both of those places,
cool.
It was just so refreshing to be at the ocean after journeying so far. But the mountains out there and the sights that you see are gorgeous, and it's not as hard on your body as the beginning of the Camino is. The beginning of the Camino, you're in the Pyrenees Mountains and your butt is getting kicked. So
wow. And that's because it's in the mountains and there's a lot of elevation change, or because you're starting to walk all day long for multiple days.
Both, a double helping of those challenging things. Yeah, it's both of those things. I mean, I had trained for a half marathon before walking, so that actually kind of was to my benefit, although walking is different than running.
Yeah.
So.
Interesting. So where would you start if you were doing the last 100 miles? Like, what city is that closest to?
In Sarria.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm seeing that on there.
So
Gotcha.
if walking from Sarria to Santiago, you can at least get your credential that says, hey, I walked the Camino. Say at certain points of the year, it's pretty crowded. Groups coming in to walk. You have people that are just starting there. So it's good to go in a season that's not like peak season. And so I'll tell you, like, the season for walking the Camino starts in like late April. You got to think, like, it's northern Spain, so it's going to be a bit cooler in the mornings and cooler in the the weather is just starting to get warmer, like springtime weather. And then you pick up peak walking season in June, July, August, and then things wind down and people stop walking around October, November. And then winter, it was snowing. It's like a week ago. So, people are not typically walking around this time. But I'm a part of an online Facebook group for females that walk alone or together. Just generally, it's called Camigas, like Camino Amigas. In their posts, about their journeys and their intentions and where they're starting from. And it's just like a really cool community.
Cool.
Information and travel tips and walking tips and shared experiences. So
that's awesome.
So I have another question for you about it that I don't know if you will necessarily know, because I've been looking as you've been describing, and you talked about that there's different routes, and you did I don't remember what you said, but it's the French one. But there's also, it looks like, a trail that goes along the northern coast.
Yes, the Camino del Norte.
Yeah. And so it goes up kind of along there and then comes down. And you talked about how moving of an experience it was, having walked all of that way and not seeing water, and then to see it once you walked past Santiago. do you think that it would be, how do I ask this question? I enjoy seeing water. So if I like thinking about all of that and like walking through a desert does not appeal to me at all. But the idea of walking along a coastline would be much more appealing to me. But do you think that that could diminish the experience if you're being able to see the ocean the whole time?
I don't think so. Like I said, like what they say is your Camino is your Camino.
Yeah.
So if you're like, man, so much life is given to me when I walk by the ocean or I'm, by the beach or I'm seeing the mountains. Like if I could walk a trail of the Camino that was just through the mountains the entire time, I would do it because I love the mountains and I find so much joy and so I get so much life. I feel alive when I'm in the mountains. I love the beach. It's beautiful, but I choose the mountains over the beach any day. So for anybody who loves the ocean and loves the coastlines and loves like these cliffs with beautiful views and scenery, Mediterranean food, I mean, you can't go wrong there. I would definitely recommend the Camino del Norte. That is one of the other Caminos that I'm looking forward to walking. It's that one and the Portuguese route are the two that I'm looking at doing next.
Well, and Ryan, that fits with where I told you that I thought you should go to in Spain. Mutriku, which is one of the little cities up north.
Right
on the coast, the northern coast. And I just, same with San Sebastian, I just thought like, oh yeah, you would love that. And so that seems like that fits. So we picked Ryan's Camino. There we go.
Yeah, there you go. So Gabe, just to give you a little bit of background, I have never been to Spain. I know lots of people who have been to Spain. I've known people who have been to Spain for a very long time. I know people who live in Spain. I've still never been to Spain. We've had, I don't even know how many podcast episodes
This is
about
practically
Spain.
a Spain podcast.
It's a sign. Venga, hombre. It's a sign.
But so I'm constantly picking up information about Spain as we talk about those, as we have guests who've been there, as Cheryl has shared about it and all those things, and just gathering more just kind of data for me for when I do finally get to Spain. That's
awesome. Can't recommend it enough. And Dora, you need somewhere to crash. Like I'll be in Santiago. Just come find me.
Yay. Yeah, Ryan, I think we could plan this trip for you and you would never need a hotel based on our various connections between the people I've stayed with and the people on this podcast. Point. I mean, like, this is going to be like before you go to Spain, we're going to need to like plan your trip together and like.
There you go. There you go. Okay, so I have another question that is not really about the trail, if that's okay, Gabe.
That's fine. Go ahead.
So at the beginning, you were talking about a lot of the places that you have traveled to kind of before you'd made it to Spain. And it sounds like you've been to quite a few Latin American countries. And so I'm just curious, language-wise, because I know that Spanish, I don't know how you would say that, right? Like Spanish spoken in Spain.
European Spanish.
Yeah, is different than Latin American Spanish that we would have maybe here in North or South Central America. So what was that experience like for you? It sounds like you started kind of in the Western Hemisphere over here. Well, I guess that's technically the Western Hemisphere too, but just barely, but here in the Americas, and then before you went to Europe and then going over there and experienced Spanish in a different sort of a way. What was that like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my mother is actually from Honduras.
Oh, okay.
So she immigrated to the States when she was a young child, and I grew up with a mom who was from Honduras and a father who's from Missouri, like the white... all that kind of stuff. So I grew up learning a bit of Castilian Spanish in my home, which is what they speak in Spain. It's like origins of Spanish is Castellano. It's Castilian Spanish. But I lived in Texas. So I had friends, the people that worked at my school, a lot of them spoke Spanish, but it was Latin Spanish. So I was, I worked in Costa Rica. Never been to Honduras. It's on my radar and travel bucket list. If there was a place I wanted to go, it would be there. It's, my roots. but it was a challenge at first going over there and realizing that some of the foundational words that I knew and I grew up knowing and, you know, I'd studied were different. Different sound. So now as I speak Spanish, I have a lisp. People know that I learned my Spanish in Spain. That first 6 months that I was in Spain, that, you know, I would have gotten to the point of being conversational. You knew, you're like, oh, you're from America, or, oh, you learned Latin Spanish. It was challenging, especially as going language classes and learning at a private language school, to kind of undo some of the learning that I had done growing up and, you know, high school and just kind of reprogramming my mind to think in a different way. And out there they use vosotros.
Right.
They don't often and you know, learning out there as well, people speak pretty fast in the south of Spain. I would say the more north you go, maybe the slower they speak. But then you get into some other dialects, which is, you know, a whole nother story. You got Galician, which is, you know, in the region that I'll be living in. You've got in Barcelona, you've got Catalonian for Catalunya. So I would say it was quite a challenge for my Latin Spanish roots to kind of adjust and learn the Castilian Spanish, but I think my Spanish is better for it. I will have an easier time going and speaking in different Spanish countries because I've learned the root language. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to go to Spain and learn the root language because it's, you know, where my family roots on my mom's side originated, was from there.
That's awesome. That's very cool. Yeah. It was so weird. It was weird for me when I spent a little bit of time there. I was there for 3 weeks. The last time I went, and had to pull up a lot of that high school Spanish. But, you know, growing up in Washington State, they really they don't focus on Spain Spanish. And my teachers, even the vosotros and everything, they just like didn't even teach it. They didn't test us on it. They said like, you don't need to know that. And so my brain was able to pull up a lot of vocabulary and a lot of conjugations. But when it came to the vosotros, it just was like, it was just like this missing hole, or I was just like, I don't know this. And I was so frustrated with my teachers because it was like, I wish I could have learned that piece of it too, you know, or learn like, oh, in this country they say this, in this other country they say this. Just like, you know, in England they say loo and we say restroom or bathroom, you know, and so that's
awesome. Yeah, I felt very similarly. I will say that like when it clicked in my brain, that European Spanish and European English are like a pair. They go together. So like some words in European English, like the British terms and British words, translate well to European Spanish, like jersey, which is like, you know, jersey, which is like a sweater in Britain. I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like a lot of the Spanish words came from the European English. Whereas you got America, and then you have Latin America, you have Central America, you have South America, and all of that, I think, translates well to American English.
Never heard that say before, and that makes so much sense.
Interesting.
Wow.
I just found that there were so many words in European English, like the words that we're not as familiar with as Americans, that translated well to European Spanish. It just made sense. Translation work. Whereas my American brain said, no, this is sweater. Okay. Jersey is what they call it in the UK.
Good observation.
That is, but that's what made sense to me.
I love it.
It makes sense.
Yeah, they're not that far from each other, so that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Gabe, for sharing about your trip. And we have a question for you based on the title of our podcast, Take Me With You. If you could take us with you to just one thing on this whole Camino that you walked, what would it be and why?
I think if I were to pick a city to take you to on the Camino, I would take you to Burgos. It's just a beautiful city, and that cathedral there is incredible. But if I were to take you somewhere that's just beautiful naturally, taking in the mountains and Galicia is one of the most serene and incredible experiences. One that I can vividly remember exactly how it felt, what it smelled like, what it looked like, what the light was like, and just how I felt. I can kind of just like close my eyes and place myself there and like meditate on that. But that's such a rich memory for me that I would have loved to like just kind of bring everybody with me in those moments of walking through beautiful Galicia.
Awesome. Oh, we would love to go. Thank you for the invitation. Sure. And what's your next trip?
Oh my gosh, what is my next trip? Actually, here we go. Actually, my next trip is to Santiago de Compostela because I'm going out for training. I have training and kind of like confirmation with the team there. I was supposed to go the end of April. As we know, challenges with travel are kind of at large right now with coronavirus and things. But it's still going to happen as far as I know. It's just, it might not happen the end of April, beginning of May. We might have to push it off a little bit. Yeah. But I'll be out there for 2 weeks. I'll stay in an Airbnb. I'll kind of check out the rhythms of my team and maybe even get to visit a couple of my friends that are going to be walking the Camino at the same time that I am supposed to be there for training. So I might buy a little plane ticket and fly out east to visit them for a day and then fly back to Santiago. But it's all kind of up in the air right now, but that'll be my next trip whenever that happens.
Oh, very cool. That's exciting. And do you have any travel questions for us?
Where is somewhere that you have a desire to travel that you never knew you would ever have a desire or would ever want to make plans to travel to that you've discovered?
Well, honestly, Spain.
Okay.
No, but like seriously, Spain was never on my list of a place that I really wanted to go. There wasn't anything there that sounded all that interesting to me. And most people that I know went in the summer and it's super, super hot and I don't like hot. So that never appealed to me at all. So that was something that I was like, meh, okay, sure. If someone was going to pay for me to go, I wouldn't say no. Right. But it was never on my list at all as a place that I wanted to go to. And having heard about just the differences in Spain and, the different geographic areas and the different cultural areas and all that sort of stuff. And then, have looked into some stuff and heard stories and things like that. Spain is a place that I would like to go now, even though I didn't want to originally.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hey, whenever you start planning, let me know. I will send some recommendations your way.
Perfect. Cheryl?
I think maybe Iceland would be one of them.
Yeah.
Because Ryan's been there, so good. And a lot of our guests have been there, and it just was a place where I kind of felt the same as Ryan was saying. Like if someone invited me, of course I'd say yes because I would say yes to going anywhere if someone invited me. But now I'm like, I need to pursue going there. And my husband loves nature and loves being in the middle of nowhere, and things like that. And so that just seems like that would kind of check the boxes for him. And it sounds like it's not super expensive necessarily.
Well, the flights aren't super expensive. Iceland itself is not cheap.
Okay, that's good to know.
You need to kind of budget for, but the flights aren't that expensive. What's funny is, do you guys remember like the Iceland tourist boom that happened back 2018? Okay, so I had a friend reach out to me the year prior, and she was like, hey, or I guess it was 2014. She said, hey, I'm going to go to Iceland, and if I take a friend with me, we get this discount if we go together with this tour group. And I was like, oh, interesting. She's like, do you think your boss would let me off? I had a brand new job. I was like, I don't know if my boss is going to let me leave. like to go to Iceland. Like that's very short notice. I'm in a new job, and luckily my boss let me go. And yeah, we went out there, and I highly recommend going to the Blue Lagoon or one of those Blue Lagoon spas. It was moment of like getting a massage inside the water is huge ice, snowflakes are like falling on your face, and you're just like, wow, this is incredible. But I can't wait to go back in like the springtime, because I went in December and it was cold.
Yeah,
I've never been cold in my life.
Really?
And so to be able to like rent a car and drive around, maybe even go on your own little tour of the Golden Circle, like that's a really cool experience.
Okay.
And kind of do your thing.
Cool.
We got back from that trip. All of a sudden there were all these deals on like going to Iceland. And we're like, I'm so glad we went when we went, because it wasn't crowded. Like people weren't overwhelmed. And then at some point, I think in the last couple of years, they were like, coming to Iceland because tourism and
because they promoted it like crazy.
Well, they did.
They did. Yeah, they promoted it a lot.
Well, yeah, Iceland is amazing. I would go back in a heartbeat.
Really?
Yeah, because it was so cool. We went in the spring. We went for spring break. I took a group of students, and I'd go back in the spring again, but it'd also be interesting to see it in the summer, because I think it would look very different in the summer than in the spring. But like anytime, I mean, I don't know that I want to go in December. That'd be real cold, and there'd be like no sunlight.
That's true. I think we had about 4 or 5 hours of sun.
Yeah.
So imagine like jet lag, and then 4 or 5 hours of sun, and trying to do all these tours. Like we were in the back of the bus one night as we were going out to try to like chase down the Northern Lights with our tour group. And I was like, I don't know what day it is. I woke up at one point and was like, I don't know where I am right now. I had this moment of like, where am I? I'm not in my bed. I'm in Iceland. Okay, here we are. But the Northern Lights were definitely worth it. I like sat there on the ground as my butt froze and like cried as my tears froze on my face. Just an incredible experience.
Yep.
Iceland for sure.
Yep. Good choice, Cheryl. Good choice.
Oh, thanks. I try.
All right. So we're going to transition into the last section of this episode called Wish You Were Here. During this segment, each of the three of us is going to share about a cool travel attraction that we've experienced at some point in our many travels. And we're just going to share it kind of like a little postcard, like a little snapshot that says, hey, this thing's really cool. Wish you were here. Gabe, what would you like to do for your Wish You Were Here?
Yeah, I'll talk about Harbin Ice Festival in Harbin, China. It's kind of nearing the border of Russia in northeast China. And this ice festival happens every year. The city is well known for it. And, you've got hundreds of thousands of people visiting every year. But basically, they have a festival of ice. They have blocks of ice that they've carved into sculptures and snow that they've built into statues, or like they had a whole cathedral that they built last year when I went. They have anime characters that are like 50 times your body size.
Wow.
They have sleigh rides pulled by reindeer. They have special treats, and it's just, they have an incredible light show. One of the cool things about it is that they try to incorporate a special site from somewhere else in the world right there. So they created the Leaning Tower of Pisa out of ice. They created the Roman Colosseum out of ice. And then they have this really long, really cool ice ride where you kind of like sled down a route that they've.
That sounds fun. Okay, this looks like beyond Disney level. I'm looking at pictures right now. Like this looks like they're putting Disney to shame with the quality.
Like things to do necessarily.
So lots to look at.
And pictures with. But it's definitely something that I will never forget. It's Harbin Ice and Snow Festival.
Wow,
that's super cool. Okay. We can add it to the list.
Guess so.
Be prepared with the thickest snow pants you can find and the thickest gloves you can find and shoes that don't freeze your toes off.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. That's super cool. All right, Cheryl, what would you like to do for your Wish You Were Here?
Mine is in New Orleans. One of the places that I went to have some lunch at when I was there in December was a po' boy bar.
A po' boy bar?
Well, po' boy and bar, I guess is what it says.
Okay.
But it's a restaurant, essentially. But
Okay.
I don't know why I called it that. And I'm looking at the name of it, and I haven't heard it pronounced, but Domelice's Po' Boy and Bar. It was featured on a show. Who's the guy with the spiky, crazy hair that does the food shows?
Guy Fieri?
He featured it one time, and he ate there, and so they needed to tell us that when we were there as well. So I was like, well, that's cool. I'm happy for them that they got featured on a show. But yeah, so it was, I had quite the long list of foods that I wanted to try when I was in New Orleans, because it's a pretty long list of like, you have to have this and this and this. And po' boys is one of them. And so,
and that's a sandwich, yes?
It's a sandwich. It's like a sub sandwich, essentially.
Okay.
But yeah, and there's all sorts of different like toppings you can get. And so they have like meatball ones or, I don't know, just like roast beef ones, different things like that. But shrimp is very common, or catfish or oyster. So like some sort of seafood is pretty common. I had one that was like a half shrimp, half oysters one that was one they recommended. And then some of them have like some sort of a sauce on top of them as well. But yeah, it's just like a really good sub sandwich is how I would describe it. And yeah, like usually French bread, I think, is what they use for those. It was wonderful. And then Daryl what did he get? He got some other sort of like a burger or something that he was just raving about. He loved it a lot. So really good food, very unassuming place, and kind of a fun area of town. So
cool.
That's where you should go.
That sounds so yummy. I wish I wasn't gluten-free.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll have some special bread I can put.
I mean, more and more restaurants are accommodating to that. Even like several years ago, I was in Italy and they had gluten-free pasta. And I was like, oh my goodness, even Italy's on board with gluten-free.
Oh, yeah,
so.
I've seen it all over Europe.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not all over Europe, but in multiple places in Europe. I've seen stuff like that. I just
love it in Spanish because then it's sin gluten, which looks like sin gluten.
Sin,
and then it looks like gluten is a sin. So I enjoy that.
Yeah, that's true.
Ryan, how about you?
So the one I'm going to do, I can't believe I haven't done already. And I was looking at our list to say, wait, have I not done this? I am going to say Stonehenge in England.
Oh, how have we not talked about Stonehenge
right?
yet?
I don't know. I love Stonehenge. I love it. I love it. I love it. It is so cool. Now, you may or may not agree. I don't know if either of you have been there before or not.
Yes.
But I loved it. It has now been 20 years almost since I was there. And there's really not a lot there, to be honest. It's these big, giant stones in a circle, and you walk around it. But it was mind-blowing to me. I didn't realize how big the stones were until I was there. And it's so amazing to me that they are still standing from thousands of years ago. And they're relatively simple. It's not this big complex structure that somebody built that, has all of these parts and all this stuff. It's just these big giant stones, some of them standing straight up, some of them, horizontal on top of other ones. And I mean, I also happen to like that they're pretty sure it had something to do with whether a calendar or astronomical somethings and, keeping time and things like that are super cool. And it's kind of out. It's not, it's not near London. It's a couple hour bus ride, I think, from London. And it's relatively not close, but near the town of Bath. If you've never been there, that's a cool place to see as well. And then something I would love to do that I have not done. but on the equinoxes and on the solstices, and I'm sure it's very, very busy, but they will let you actually go. They do organize things and they'll let you actually go into like beyond just the path that goes around it, but actually walk in amongst the stones, because on those days, on an equinox or on a solstice, the sun will line up at a particular place in the circle of Stonehenge when it is either rising or setting. And it depends. And I don't know which one's which for which thing, but it'll actually, and that's partly how they know that it was calendars and for keeping time and things, because it lines up on those days in very specific ways. And so that was a goal of mine at some point. It would be really cool to do that. So Stonehenge in England, if you make it out, it's, you can do a day trip just out there and back if you're in London. And from my opinion, totally worth it.
Yeah, I was out in London a few years back when I was living in Spain, visiting a friend of mine from university, and she and I had made plans to go to Stonehenge, and then we didn't go. I can't remember for what reason, but now you're talking about it, I'm like, I have to do that. I have to go. I'm so jealous.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So I went there when I was in middle school. And this was the time, Ryan, that you and I realized we were both in England about 20 years ago.
Right.
Like almost around a similar time, which is pretty funny. And I was there on a family vacation. And so we went to London and then we did like a loop of the country. And I was in 8th grade at the time. And so I do not remember what the route was. I mean, at some point we were in Bath. I know that. Mm-hmm. But we went to Stonehenge, which was great. And it was funny. I remember thinking it was really cool. But my specific memory I have at Stonehenge is that all 5 of us in my family, we all did the audio tour. And, there's like this big, long looking, it's like a phone with a handle under, like below it.
It's kind of like a thick wooden spoon or something that it's like that length, right? Of like a wooden spoon, except it's thick all the way down and you hold it up to your ear.
A metal detector that somebody holds at the airport on you, like it. Yep. And then there's like a keypad on it. And so there were all these options to like, they would tell you a piece of the history of it or whatever. And then it'd say, if you want to hear about this, press 1. If you want to hear about this other thing, press 2, and so you could kind of decide which things you wanted to listen to. And for some reason, all my 2 sisters and I, all 3 of us ended up listening to something that was more goofy. Like they like had these, it sounded so very Monty Python of like the way they were talking. It was like 2 people dialoguing about where like the reddish something on them came from. And one of them was like, some people say it's blood. And then they were like, blood? It's not blood. And like, it was really goofy. And then my parents, both of them ended up listening to something else, like another piece of the audio tour. And so my sisters and I were cracking up. We were laughing so hard. We just thought it was hilarious. And we also like loved Monty Python. We think British humor is so great. And so we're all laughing. And my parents just kept glaring at us because they were like, you guys need to stop laughing. Because I think that they thought we weren't appreciating it. And so it was just so funny. And then we have, obviously this is like back in the day of film cameras. There's this really sweet picture of the 3 of us all with our audio tours with Stonehenge in the background that I just love. If I can find it, I'll post it on our Instagram because it's one of my favorite travel photos from my childhood is this photo.
And that's really funny.
Yeah, Stonehenge is like this very special place in my heart. I think just like in my family relationship too. And yeah.
What would be hilarious is if you pull out that photo and I'm in the background of it. Wouldn't that be funny if we were there actually at the same time?
I hope so.
I doubt that's the case.
Right, at some point we need to drill down what dates we were both in England because we know it was the same summer, right? Yeah. Summer of 2000.
Yep.
Yeah, we need to figure this out. Like that's just crazy. So oh man. Well, Gabe, thank you so much for being on our podcast. We loved having you.
It's been so fun. I love talking about this. Let's do it again sometime.
I know. Well, you're always welcome back. We are not against having repeat guests. In fact, we
Not
would love
at
it.
all.
So, yeah, definitely come back sometime. Do you have anything that you would like to plug?
Sure. So my website is gabethegirl.com. Right now it's kind of linked to my upcoming job and what I'm going to be doing in Spain. I'm trying to build a support base back home so that when I go out there, I still have like community back home that I'm connected to out there. But basically talks a lot about like what my vision is and my heart for travel and being taken to the world before I'm taken from it. It's kind of like my prayer mantra. But then also you can find me on Instagram at gabe.the.girl. I will share one more thing. I do Camino coaching. So if anybody who listens to this is interested in walking the Camino, I do Camino coaching and mentoring.
Interesting. So would that still be through your Instagram account then?
They can message me at hello@gabethegirl.com.
Great.
Awesome.
Very cool.
That's great. Now, hopefully you will also be willing to share some pictures with us from your cool hiking experience and maybe a few other things as well. And if people want to find those, not just scrolling through your Instagram, but want a quick place to see the ones specific to the trip you told us about, they can follow us on Instagram. We are at Timwy Podcast. That's TMWY for Take Me With You Podcast. And not only we're on Instagram, but we're also on Twitter and Facebook as well.
You can also email us at timwepodcast@gmail.com. Send us your travel stories, guest suggestions that you have. Maybe share with us what is a place that you never knew you wanted to go to until you listened to this podcast.
You can also call us and leave us a voicemail about any cool travel related thing, whether it's an experience you had or a question you have for us or a suggestion or feedback on the podcast. We'd love to hear from you. The number for that is 406-763-8699, or another way to remember that would be 406-POD-TIMWY. We would really appreciate if you would rate and review us so that more people can get an idea of what our podcast is about and that maybe they would want to listen to it. You can also subscribe to the podcast to make sure you are notified every time we post a new episode. And we would really appreciate if you would share about this episode on social media so other people can hear the cool story of walking the Camino de Santiago by Gabe.
As always, thank you to Beth Reed Miller for the awesome artwork. You can check out more of Beth's artwork at Beth Is Something. And thank you to Erica Corbin for the use of her song Round the Globe. You can listen to Erica's music wherever music is sold or streamed.
Gabe, it was wonderful hearing from you today. Thank you so much for sharing your travel experiences with us.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yay!
That's it for this week's episode. So until next time, remember to take me with you.
Take me with you!
Can we get a sailboat chasing down the sunset as we float round and round the globe? Salty air and balmy nights, guided only by the lights above, and a little love. Oh, the world is out there waiting to explore, and all our troubles here wanting to be